In the silent grip of night, an 8-year-old girl named Clara limped through the desolate streets, her small figure barely visible under the dim glow of flickering streetlights. Each step she took was a battle against the searing pain radiating from her battered body, her frail frame swaddled in makeshift bandages. Clara's pale skin bore the harsh marks of a desperate flight, cuts and bruises that told the story of an escape fueled by sheer willpower. The abandoned cityscape mirrored her inner turmoil. Towering buildings loomed like silent sentinels, and narrow alleys yawned into darkness. Clara was utterly alone, the emptiness around her deepening the ache of fear that pulsed through her. Yet she pressed on, her tiny feet dragging her further from the nightmare she had fled, though the shadows of terror still clung to her like a second skin. Her breaths came shallow and uneven, her pulse a drumbeat of panic as fractured memories of that fateful night replayed in her mind. Clara could almost hear the creak of the hospital door as it opened, could see the silhouette of the man who had come for her, the coldness in his gaze, the calculated way he approached her bed. It all haunted her. The metallic taste of fear had filled her mouth as she made a desperate, instinctive choice to run. Now, the cold night air gnawed at her thin clothes, sapping her strength. Her legs wavered, but Clara's determination burned brighter than her exhaustion. She wasn't just running from danger. She was chasing a glimmer of hope, a sliver of safety she wasn't even sure existed. As she stumbled into the emptiness of another block, her eyes landed on a sign glowing faintly in the distance. Child Care Center. Relief washed over her, thick and heavy, as though her lungs had just taken their first full breath. But her body, pushed beyond its limits, finally gave out. With a soft gasp, Clara crumpled to the ground just feet from the entrance, her vision fading as tears streaked her dirty cheeks. In that fragile moment, the promise of refuge was within reach, but the battle for survival had only just begun. Hours later, Clara's consciousness drifted into uneasy clarity as she lay in a sterile hospital bed. The soft hum of machines and the muted glow of the overhead lights did little to calm her restless spirit. She flinched at the faintest sound, her fragile body tense with fear. Despite the safety of her surroundings, her mind remained trapped in that dreadful night. She remembered the moment the door to her room had creaked open, the faint squeak of hinges louder than any alarm. Clara had turned her head just in time to see the silhouette of a man slip through the doorway. His presence was suffocating, his movements deliberate and predatory. The dim light had caught the sharp angles of his face, a face she would never forget. Terror paralyzed her as he moved closer. Every muscle in her body screamed to run, but fear gripped her tightly. When his shadow loomed over her bed, Clara's voice betrayed her, releasing only a hoarse whisper. "No, please." The man had said nothing, his silence amplifying the menace in his gaze. Desperation surged through Clara's veins, overriding her fear. With a sudden burst of courage, she threw herself off the bed, her bare feet meeting the cold floor with a jarring thud. The hospital's fluorescent lights seemed dimmer, the hallways stretching endlessly as she ran, her legs barely able to carry her. Behind her, she heard his heavy footsteps and the sound of a chair being overturned. Adrenaline fueled her flight, but her strength was rapidly waning. She had pushed through doors, darted down staircases, and finally escaped into the night. Each step away from the hospital felt like a victory, but the fear of being caught haunted her every moment. Now, lying unconscious outside the child care center, Clara's mind replayed the events in fractured pieces. The terror, the helplessness, and the overwhelming question. Why had he come for me? The early morning silence at the child care center was interrupted by the faint sound of a groan. Amelia, the center's director, had been working late in her office, the warm glow of a desk lamp illuminating the stacks of documents in front of her. At first, she thought the sound had been a figment of her exhaustion, but then it came again, a faint, desperate sound. Curious and concerned, Amelia moved swiftly to the door. Opening it, she gasped at the sight before her. A young girl lay crumpled on the ground, her tiny body battered and bruised, her clothes torn and filthy. Blood and dirt marred her pale skin, and she looked as though she hadn't eaten in days. "Oh, dear God," Amelia whispered, dropping to her knees beside the child. "What happened to you, little one?" Clara's small chest rose and fell faintly, a sign that she was alive, though barely. Amelia's heart ached as she gently lifted the girl into her arms. She was shockingly light, as if malnourishment had stolen her strength. With a mix of urgency and tenderness, Amelia carried Clara inside, shouting for help. The staff quickly gathered, their faces a mixture of shock and concern. "Call the doctor," Amelia ordered, her voice firm despite the lump in her throat. They brought Clara into a warm, clean room and carefully laid her on the bed. Minutes later, the center's on-call doctor arrived, his expression grim as he began to assess Clara's injuries. "She's been through hell," he muttered, his hands steady as he worked. Cuts were cleaned, bruises were treated, and fluids were administered to combat dehydration. Meanwhile, Amelia couldn't pull her thoughts away from the girl. Who was she? Where had she come from? And most pressing of all, what kind of monster could do this to a child? Hours passed, but Amelia remained by Clara's side, unwilling to leave until the girl woke up. When Clara finally stirred, her eyelids fluttering open, Amelia leaned closer. Her soft smile masked the worry in her heart. "You're safe now," she whispered. Clara's wide, frightened eyes met Amelia's, and for a moment, neither spoke. Then, in a voice barely audible, Clara asked, "Where am I?" "You're at the childcare center," Amelia replied gently. "We found you outside, and now we're going to take care of you." Tears welled up in Clara's eyes. They tried to hurt me." Her voice trembled, each word heavy with fear. Amelia reached for Clara's small hand, holding it firmly but kindly. "No one will hurt you here, I promise. You're safe with us." For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Clara allowed herself to believe in those words. Exhaustion took over, and she closed her eyes, clutching onto Amelia's promise like a lifeline. As Clara rested, Amelia's resolve hardened. She would not only protect this fragile child, but also uncover the truth behind her suffering. Whatever Clara had endured, it was far from over. But Amelia vowed that this time, Clara would not face it alone. The days that followed were a delicate balancing act. Clara remained withdrawn, speaking only when absolutely necessary and flinching at the smallest of noises. The staff at the center worked to create a warm and welcoming environment, but it was Amelia who took the lead in helping the frightened girl feel secure. Each morning, Amelia would sit by Clara's bedside, bringing a warm bowl of porridge and softly coaxing her to eat. Clara's hands trembled as she lifted the spoon, her guarded eyes watching Amelia's every move. "You don't have to say anything," Amelia reassured her gently. "Just take your time. We're here for you." Gradually, Clara began to accept Amelia's presence. The walls she had built around herself were high, but Amelia's patient demeanor chipped away at them. She introduced Clara to small routines, a walk in the garden, time spent coloring pictures, and simple conversations that didn't pry too deeply into her past. "Do you like flowers?" Amelia asked one afternoon as they strolled through the center's small garden. Clara nodded hesitantly, her fingers brushing the petals of a yellow daffodil. "My mom liked flowers," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Amelia knelt beside her, her heart breaking at the vulnerability in Clara's words. "She must have had a beautiful garden," Amelia said softly, choosing her words carefully. Clara hesitated before answering. "She did. I used to help her water the roses." A faint smile flickered across her face, only to vanish as quickly as it had appeared. Amelia didn't press for more. She knew Clara's memories were fragile fragments of a life torn apart, and it would take time for the girl to piece them together. Instead, she focused on creating new, safe memories for her, a foundation on which Clara could rebuild her sense of trust. One cloudy afternoon, a tall man carrying several boxes arrived at the childcare center. Ethan Blake, a successful businessman and philanthropist, was a regular donor to the facility. His sharp suit and polished demeanor masked the quiet sadness in his eyes, a lingering grief from the loss of his wife and daughter in a tragic accident years ago. "Amelia," Ethan greeted warmly as she came to meet him. "It's good to see you." Amelia smiled, though her mind lingered on Clara. And you, Ethan? The kids always look forward to your visits. They carried the boxes inside, filled with toys, clothes, and school supplies. As the staff began to unpack, Ethan's attention drifted to a corner of the room where a small figure sat at a table. Clara was hunched over, her tiny hand gripping a colored pencil as she worked intently on a drawing. Something about the girl caught Ethan's eye. Her hair, her posture, even the way her brow furrowed in concentration. It all felt hauntingly familiar. He approached cautiously, his footsteps soft on the wooden floor. "Hello there," Ethan said gently, kneeling beside her. Clara stiffened, her hand pausing mid-stroke. She turned her head slightly, her wary eyes meeting his. "Hi," she murmured, clutching the pencil tighter. "What are you drawing?" he asked, his voice kind and free of pressure. Clara hesitated, then reluctantly slid the paper toward him. It was a picture of a garden, filled with vibrant flowers and a glowing sun. "It's beautiful," Ethan said, his voice catching. Memories flooded his mind. His late wife Elena tending to their garden, their daughter Rosa laughing as she sketched sunflowers and tulips. The resemblance between this girl and Rosa was too strong to dismiss. "Amelia," Ethan said quietly, turning to the director. "Could I speak with you privately?" Minutes later, the two of them sat in Amelia's office, the door closed tightly behind them. Ethan's face was pale, his usual composure replaced with an urgency Amelia had never seen before. "That girl," Ethan began, struggling to steady his voice. "Clara, there's something about her. I can't explain it, but she reminds me of my daughter Rosa." Amelia's brow furrowed as she listened. "Ethan, Clara's been through a terrible ordeal. She hasn't shared much about her past, but we're doing everything we can to help her feel safe." Ethan leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly. "I need to know more about her. Please, Amelia. If there's even the slightest chance that she could be my daughter, I have to find out." Amelia hesitated. She had seen Clara's fragile state and was reluctant to do anything that might overwhelm her. But she also saw the pain in Ethan's eyes, a father's desperate hope. "I understand," Amelia said at last, "but we have to proceed carefully. Clara is still healing, and we don't want to frighten her." Ethan nodded, his jaw set with determination. "I'll do whatever it takes. Just tell me how I can help." In the days that followed, Ethan became a quiet presence at the center, spending time with the children and observing Clara from a distance. Each interaction with her, no matter how brief, only deepened his conviction. He began discreetly gathering information, determined to uncover the truth about Clara's past, even as he struggled with the fear of false hope. For Clara, Ethan's gentle demeanor slowly began to feel less intimidating. Though she didn't fully understand why he seemed so interested in her, she couldn't deny the warmth in his gaze, a warmth that reminded her of something she couldn't quite place. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that Clara was more than just a child in need. Every glance, every hesitant word from her stirred memories he had long buried, memories of his beloved daughter, Rosa. Driven by an unrelenting need for answers, Ethan enlisted the help of private investigators and legal experts to trace Clara's origins. One afternoon, as he sifted through a pile of hospital records and police reports in Amelia's office, a piece of information leapt out at him. A record of a child found injured near the site of his family's tragic car accident years ago. The description matched Clara, her age, her features, even the approximate timeline. Ethan's hands trembled as he read the report aloud to Amelia. "How could they have found a child at the scene and not told me?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. Amelia sat across from him, her face pale but resolute. "Ethan, it's possible someone deliberately kept this from you. We need to dig deeper." They continued their investigation, speaking with hospital staff and examining case files. The trail led them to a devastating revelation. Someone had deliberately hidden Clara's identity after the accident. The person responsible had falsified records, making it appear as though Rosa had died at the scene. The name that surfaced in their inquiries sent a chill down Ethan's spine. Logan, his own brother. Logan had been Ethan's rock after the accident, consoling him in his darkest moments. But now, the evidence pointed to a shocking betrayal. Records showed Logan had paid hospital staff to misidentify Rosa and had arranged for her placement in foster care under a false name. The reason? Logan had been desperate to control Ethan's wealth, and removing Rosa from the picture had made Ethan more isolated and easier to manipulate. Ethan's grief and rage collided in his chest. He clenched his fists, his voice low but steady. "I'll get to the bottom of this. Clara deserves to know the truth, and Logan will answer for what he's done." Amelia placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Ethan, we'll do this together. Clara needs both of us now." It took days to arrange a DNA test, but to Ethan, every hour felt like an eternity. He spent as much time as possible at the child care center, carefully building trust with Clara. He didn't want to overwhelm her, but felt an urgent need to be close. One afternoon, Ethan found Clara in the garden, her small figure hunched over a patch of daisies. She was silently pulling weeds, her fingers delicate but determined. "Clara," he said softly, sitting on the grass beside her. She glanced up, her guarded eyes softening slightly. "Hi." Ethan hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I'd like to do something important, something to help us learn more about you. It's a simple test, nothing scary, but it could tell us a lot about who you are. Would that be okay?" Clara tilted her head. Her curiosity piqued. "A test? What kind of test?" Ethan smiled gently. "It's called a DNA test. It can help us understand where you come from. And it might tell me if you're someone very special to me." Clara blinked, her small hands stilling on the weeds. "Special? Like how?" Ethan swallowed the lump in his throat. "I lost someone very important to me a long time ago. And when I look at you, I feel like I've found her again." Clara's eyes filled with uncertainty, but she nodded slowly. "Okay." The test was performed the next day, and then the waiting began. Ethan's emotions swung between hope and fear as he replayed every interaction with Clara, searching for signs that she was his daughter. He confided in Amelia, who stood by his side through the storm of emotions. Finally, the call came. Ethan sat in Amelia's office, his phone pressed tightly to his ear. "Mr. Blake," the voice on the other end said. "The DNA test confirms it. Clara is your daughter." Ethan's breath hitched, his vision blurring with tears. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice breaking. He hung up and turned to Amelia, his face a mixture of joy and disbelief. "She's Rosa," he said. "She's my daughter." Amelia's eyes shone with tears. "I knew it, Ethan. I could see it in the way you looked at her." That evening, Ethan and Amelia sat Clara down in a quiet room. Clara looked between them, her small hands fidgeting in her lap. "Clara," Ethan began, his voice soft but steady, "there's something very important we need to tell you." Clara's brow furrowed. "What is it?" Ethan reached for her hand, his heart aching with love. "We did the test, and it showed something amazing. You're not just Clara. You're Rosa, my daughter." Clara's wide eyes filled with confusion. "Your daughter?" Ethan nodded, tears spilling down his cheeks. "I lost you in an accident, or at least I thought I did. I've been searching for you ever since. And now I've found you." For a long moment, Clara said nothing. Her small hands trembled, and her lips quivered as she tried to process the revelation. "You're my dad," she whispered. "Yes," Ethan said, his voice breaking. "And I promise, you'll never be alone again." Clara's tears fell freely now, her emotions a whirlwind of fear, hope, and disbelief. Slowly, she reached for Ethan, allowing him to wrap her in a gentle embrace. "I missed you," she said, her voice muffled against his chest. "I missed you too, Rosa," Ethan whispered. "More than I can ever say." Amelia watched the scene unfold, her heart swelling with emotion. The reunion was just the beginning of a journey toward healing and rediscovery, but it was a step forward, a step toward the family both Ethan and Clara had been yearning for. Ethan couldn't celebrate the reunion with his daughter fully. Not yet. The shadow of betrayal still loomed large over him, and the truth about his brother Logan's actions demanded justice. Late one night, while Clara slept soundly at the center, Ethan pored over the documents Amelia had helped him gather. The evidence of Logan's involvement was overwhelming. Bank records showing bribes paid to hospital staff, falsified death certificates, and a trail of lies that had allowed him to control Ethan's fortune for years. Amelia found Ethan in the center's small office, the weight of exhaustion clear on his face. "You haven't slept," she said softly, setting a cup of tea on the desk. Ethan shook his head. "I can't rest until I confront Logan. He betrayed me, Amelia. Worse, he took Rosa from me. How could someone I trusted so deeply do something so monstrous?" Amelia placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Sometimes, greed and desperation make people do terrible things. But you have the strength to face this, Ethan. Not just for yourself, but for Clara." Her words fortified him. The next day, Ethan arranged to meet Logan at a private location, a cafe where they had shared countless conversations in better times. Logan arrived with his usual charming demeanor, completely unaware of what awaited him. "Ethan," Logan said with a smile as he approached the table. "What's this about? You sounded serious on the phone." Ethan stared at him, his jaw tight. "Sit down, Logan." The shift in Ethan's tone made Logan hesitate, but he complied. "You know why I called you here," Ethan began, sliding a folder across the table. "I've been digging into Clara's past. Or should I say, Rosa's past?" Logan's face paled. "Rosa? Ethan, what are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about," Ethan said, his voice low and cold. "The bribes, the falsified records, the lies you fed me after the accident. I know you took Rosa from me. I know everything." Logan's hands shook as he opened the folder, his eyes scanning the damning evidence. "Ethan, I can explain," he stammered. Ethan slammed his hand on the table, making Logan flinch. "Explain? Explain how you tore my family apart for your own gain? Explain how you let me mourn my daughter for years while you sat back and enjoyed the benefits of my grief?" Logan's mask of confidence crumbled. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said weakly. "I was drowning in debt. The creditors were threatening me, and I thought if I could take control of your assets, I could fix everything. But I never meant to hurt you like this." Ethan's eyes burned with fury. "You didn't just hurt me, Logan. You hurt Rosa. You stole years of her life. And for what? Money?" Logan looked down, his guilt written across his face. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he muttered. "Forgiveness is out of the question," Ethan replied, standing abruptly. "But justice isn't. I've already handed over everything to the authorities. Your time is up, Logan." As Ethan walked away, Logan slumped in his chair, the weight of his choices finally catching up to him. Ethan's determination to seek justice came with unforeseen consequences. Days after Logan's arrest, Ethan received a call that made his blood run cold. Logan had escaped from custody. "What do you mean he escaped?" Ethan demanded, pacing the floor of Amelia's office. "He attacked a guard during transport and fled," the officer on the other end of the line explained. "We're doing everything we can to locate him, but we advise you to take extra precautions. He might come after you." Ethan hung up, his heart pounding. He turned to Amelia, his expression grave. "Logan's out there, and if he's desperate enough to escape, he won't hesitate to come for Rosa." Amelia's face was equally serious. "We need to tighten security immediately. I'll call the staff and have them on high alert. We'll also notify the police to increase patrols around the center." The following days were a whirlwind of preparations. Surveillance cameras were upgraded, locks were reinforced, and guards were stationed at the center's entrances. Despite these measures, the tension was palpable. Every creak, every shadow seemed like a potential threat. Ethan spent his nights watching the monitors, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. His love for Clara, his Rosa, had given him a renewed purpose, and he wasn't about to let Logan take her away again. Meanwhile, Logan lurked in the city's shadows, his anger festering into hatred. The news of Rosa's survival had ignited a twisted sense of vengeance in him. If he couldn't control Ethan's fortune, he would ensure Ethan paid another price. One night, as Clara slept peacefully in her room, Ethan noticed movement on the security cameras. A figure darted across the garden, sticking to the shadows. His stomach clenched as he realized who it was. "It's Logan," Ethan said, his voice tight with urgency. Amelia, standing beside him, gasped. "We need to call the police." Ethan nodded but didn't wait. He grabbed a flashlight and headed for the garden, his instinct screaming to protect his daughter. Amelia followed close behind, her heart pounding in her chest. They found Logan near the back entrance, fiddling with the lock. Ethan stepped forward, his flashlight shining directly on his brother's face. "Logan!" Ethan shouted, his voice firm and filled with fury. Logan turned, a twisted smile on his lips. "Well, brother, I was wondering when you'd show up." Before Ethan could respond, Logan lunged, his desperation turning into violence. The struggle was chaotic, and Amelia called for security, who arrived just in time to subdue Logan. As the guards dragged Logan away, he shouted threats, his voice echoing into the night. "This isn't over, Ethan. You'll regret this." Ethan stood there, breathing heavily, his fists clenched. Amelia placed a hand on his arm, grounding him. "It's over for now," she said softly. "Let's focus on keeping Rosa safe." Ethan nodded, his resolve stronger than ever. "No matter what it takes, I'll protect her." That night, as the police escorted Logan away, Ethan returned to Clara's room. She was still asleep, her small chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. Sitting beside her bed, Ethan brushed a strand of hair from her face and whispered, "I'll keep you safe, Rosa. I promise." The events of that night left a lingering weight over the child care center. Though Logan was back in custody, the fear of what might happen next clung to Ethan and Amelia like a shadow. For Ethan, protecting Clara wasn't just a promise. It was his reason to keep going. But the cost of safeguarding her had begun to take its toll. Clara, oblivious to the danger she had narrowly avoided, continued her journey of healing with Amelia's unwavering support. However, Ethan found himself watching her with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Every laugh she shared with the other children, every quiet moment spent coloring in the garden, was precious to him, yet they also filled him with dread. "You need to rest, Ethan," Amelia said one evening as she found him sitting by Clara's room, his gaze fixed on the door. "You're wearing yourself thin, and Clara needs you at your best." Ethan sighed, his shoulders slumping. "I just can't shake the thought of Logan coming back. What if I'm not there when she needs me?" Amelia knelt beside him, her voice gentle but firm. "You're here now, and that's what matters. Clara is safe, Ethan, and she needs more than just your protection. She needs your presence. She needs her father." Her words struck a chord in Ethan. He realized that his constant vigilance, though well-intentioned, was robbing him of moments he could share with Clara. Determined to shift his focus, he began spending more quality time with her, creating memories that weren't defined by fear. Ethan's decision to be more present marked a turning point in his relationship with Clara. Every day, he found new ways to connect with her, from reading bedtime stories to teaching her how to plant flowers in the garden. Slowly, the walls Clara had built around her heart began to crumble. One sunny afternoon, Ethan and Clara sat under a large oak tree in the garden. Clara was busy sketching, her pencil moving with quiet concentration. "What are you drawing?" Ethan asked, leaning closer. "It's a picture of us," Clara said shyly, holding up the paper. On it was a simple but heartfelt image of a man, a girl, and a woman standing in a field of flowers. Ethan's throat tightened. "It's beautiful," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Is that Amelia with us?" Clara nodded. "She's like a mom. She's always there when I'm scared." Ethan smiled, though his heart ached at the thought of what Clara had lost. "She's amazing, isn't she? Just like you." Clara set her pencil down and turned to him. "Do you think Mom would like her?" Ethan blinked, caught off guard. "I think she would love her," he said softly. "And I know she'd be so proud of you." The moment brought them closer, their bond strengthening with each shared word. Over time, Clara began to call him Dad, the name hesitant at first but soon spoken with confidence. Amelia, too, played an integral role in their growing family dynamic. She guided Clara through her nightmares, offering gentle reassurances that the darkness could no longer hurt her. Her unwavering kindness extended to Ethan, who found solace in her quiet strength. One night, as they walked through the garden after dinner, Ethan turned to Amelia. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. "For what?" Amelia asked, her eyes curious. "For saving her," Ethan replied. his voice steady but filled with emotion. "For saving me." Amelia smiled, her gaze soft. "You don't need to thank me, Ethan. Being here with both of you, that's enough." Their connection deepened with every passing day. Together, they became a family, imperfect, but whole. The transformation of their small, budding family was visible in every corner of the child care center. Clara, once a timid and fragile child, had begun to flourish. She laughed with other children, joined group activities, and even started sharing her sketches during art sessions. Her drawings no longer depicted just solitary flowers but vibrant, lively scenes filled with people and places that radiated hope. Ethan, too, was a changed man. The weight of grief and guilt that had once consumed him was gradually replaced by purpose and joy. His mornings were spent making breakfast with Clara, her laughter filling the kitchen as she clumsily helped him stir pancake batter. Afternoons were reserved for walks in the garden, where they planted flowers and talked about the future. But amidst the newfound peace, Ethan's feelings for Amelia grew deeper. He admired her unwavering strength, her compassion for the children, and the way she cared for Clara as though she were her own. It wasn't long before he realized she had become an integral part of his life. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan invited Amelia to join him in the garden. Clara was playing with the other children, her carefree giggles echoing in the distance. "Amelia," Ethan began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I've been meaning to say this for a while now." Amelia tilted her head, her expression curious. "What is it?" "You've done more for Clara and me than I can ever put into words," Ethan said. "You've given us a home, a sense of safety, and a reason to believe in happiness again. I don't know where we'd be without you." Amelia's cheeks flushed, and she smiled softly. "You've both brought so much light to this place, Ethan. Watching Clara grow and seeing you rebuild your life. It's been a privilege." Ethan took a deep breath, the gravity of his next words weighing on him. "I want us to be a family, Amelia. You, me, and Clara. Not just in the way we are now, but officially. Will you give us that chance?" Amelia's eyes glistened with tears, and she reached out to take his hand. "Yes, Ethan. I'd like that more than anything." The announcement of Ethan and Amelia's engagement brought joy and excitement to the child care center. The children eagerly helped with the preparations, turning the garden into a magical venue adorned with flowers and twinkling lights. Clara, overjoyed at the idea of Amelia officially becoming her mother, took charge of designing handmade decorations, her creativity shining through in every detail. On the day of the wedding, the garden was transformed into a dreamscape. Rows of chairs lined the path to an archway draped in roses and ivy. The children and staff sat eagerly, their faces glowing with happiness. Clara, dressed in a simple white dress, walked down the aisle ahead of Amelia, scattering petals with every step. She beamed with pride, her heart full as she looked back to see Amelia following. Amelia's gown was modest yet elegant, and the joy in her eyes outshone everything else. Ethan stood at the altar, his heart pounding as he watched the woman who had changed his life approach him. When she reached him, he took her hands in his voice trembling with emotion as he spoke his vows. "Amelia, you've been a guiding light in my darkest moments. You've taught me to hope again, to love again, and to be the father Clara deserves. Today, I promise to stand by your side through every challenge, every joy, and every moment in between. I love you." Amelia's voice was steady, though her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Ethan, you've shown me the meaning of resilience, kindness, and love. Together, we've built something beautiful, and I vow to cherish and nurture that for the rest of my life. I love you." The ceremony concluded with a heartfelt kiss, drawing cheers and applause from everyone present. Clara ran to them, wrapping her small arms around both Ethan and Amelia. "We're a family now," she whispered, her voice filled with happiness. The celebration that followed was filled with music, laughter, and dancing. The children performed a play they had rehearsed in secret, drawing smiles and tears from the newlyweds. As the night wore on, Ethan and Amelia stole a quiet moment together under the stars, their hands intertwined. "We've come so far," Ethan murmured, looking at Amelia. And we still have so much to look forward to, Amelia replied, her voice full of hope. The days that followed were filled with the rhythm of family life. Clara thrived in school, her confidence growing with every achievement. Ethan and Amelia worked together to expand the childcare center, ensuring it remained a haven for children in need. As time went on, the garden where they had exchanged their vows became a symbol of their journey, a place where love, hope, and second chances flourished. Together, they faced the future, united by the bonds they had built and the promise of brighter days ahead. Epilogue. The Child Care Center became a beacon of hope in the community, with Ethan and Amelia dedicating their lives to helping children like Clara. Their story inspired others, proving that even in the face of darkness, love and resilience could light the way to a new beginning. And in the quiet moments of their lives, whether in the laughter of children or the simple joy of planting flowers in the garden, they found the happiness they had longed for together.